August, 1566. A small fortress town in southern Hungary, called Szigetvar. Inside its walls, roughly 2,300 defenders. Marching toward them, an Ottoman army of close to 100,000 men, the largest military force in Europe, led by the most powerful ruler on the continent. That ruler is Suleiman the Magnificent, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire for 46 years. Conqueror of Belgrade. Conqueror of Rhodes. The man who once laid siege to Vienna itself. He is now roughly 72 years old, and this will be his 13th and final military campaign. He will never leave Szigetvar alive. Here is the detail almost nobody knows. For weeks after the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire died, his own army did not know it. His death was hidden, from his own soldiers, to prevent the empire from collapsing into chaos. A tiny fortress. A dying empire's greatest sultan. A secret kept from 100,000 men. This is the siege that some call the battle that stopped the Ottomans forever. That claim is dramatic. It is also, as we'll see, not the whole truth, and the real story is more interesting than the myth. Before we go further, everything in this video is drawn from documented history, Ottoman court records, Habsburg reports, and the accounts of contemporary chroniclers. Where later poetry and legend added to the story, we will say so directly. No blending fact with folklore. This is the Siege of Szigetvar, 1566. Stay with us. By 1566, the Ottoman Empire under Suleiman I had reached its greatest territorial extent. It stretched from North Africa to the Persian Gulf, from the Red Sea to the gates of Central Europe. Suleiman had already besieged Vienna once before, in 1529. He had crushed the Kingdom of Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, killing its king and opening most of Hungary to Ottoman control. By the 1560s, Hungary itself was split three ways: Ottoman-controlled territory in the south and center, Habsburg-controlled Royal Hungary in the north and west, and the semi-independent Principality of Transylvania in the east. Szigetvar was a fortified town in southern Hungary. Its name literally means island castle, because it was surrounded by marshland and the Almas River, which made direct assault difficult. Its commander was Nikola Šubić Zrinski, known in Hungarian as Miklo Zrinyi, a Croatian-Hungarian nobleman, Ban of Croatia, and a veteran of decades of border warfare against the Ottomans. Zrinski was not a minor figure. He had already fought Ottoman forces for years along the Habsburg-Ottoman frontier and had a reputation as a skilled, aggressive commander. In the spring of 1566, Suleiman personally led a massive army north from Constantinople. His stated objective was Vienna, the Habsburg capital, and the same city that had defeated Ottoman ambitions in 1529. But first, the Ottoman advance had to deal with Habsburg-held fortresses standing in its path. Szigetvar lay directly on one of the key routes toward Vienna. Suleiman's army arrived at its walls in early August 1566. Contemporary estimates for the size of the Ottoman force vary. Ottoman and European sources give different numbers, but modern historians generally place it in the range of 100,000 troops, including artillery, janissaries, and cavalry. Zrinski's garrison numbered around 2,300 men, a mix of Croatian, Hungarian, and other soldiers. The siege began on August 6, 1566. Ottoman forces surrounded the town and its inner fortress and began a sustained bombardment. Szigetvar was built in three connected sections: the town itself, an old town fortification, and the inner castle. Ottoman forces took each section in stages, at heavy cost, as defenders fell back and kept fighting from the next line of walls. Zrinski's men held the outer town for nearly 3 weeks under constant artillery fire, then withdrew into the new town section, and finally into the inner castle itself, as Ottoman engineers used mines and cannon to collapse walls section by section. Every stage of retreat cost the Ottomans time, and cost them soldiers. Here is the detail that separates Szigetvar from almost every other siege in history. Sultan Suleiman I died in his tent during the siege, on the night of September 5 to 6, 1566, just one day before the fortress finally fell. Ottoman and Western sources broadly agree that his death came from natural causes, most likely illness, consistent with his advanced age and the physical strain of the campaign, not from combat. His Grand Vizier, Sokalu Mehmed Pasha, made an extraordinary decision. He kept the Sultan's death secret from the army. Only a small inner circle knew. Suleiman's body was reportedly kept in his tent, and for a period afterward, orders continued to be issued as if the Sultan were still alive and in command, while messengers were secretly sent to summon his son, Selim, to take the throne before word could spread and destabilize the army in enemy territory. This is documented Ottoman succession practice, not legend, keeping a sultan's death concealed during a military campaign, specifically to prevent panic, desertion, or succession conflict among troops far from the capital. On September 7, 1566, Ottoman forces launched their final assault on the inner castle, which by then was heavily damaged and burning from repeated bombardment. Zrinski, facing overwhelming odds and a fortress that could no longer be defended, made his decision. Rather than surrender, he opened the castle gates and led his remaining men in a direct charge into the surrounding Ottoman forces. He was killed in that final charge, along with the vast majority of his surviving garrison. There is one additional well-documented detail. As Ottoman soldiers pushed into the castle, a gunpowder store inside caught fire and exploded, killing a large number of the attacking troops in that final push, a documented event reported by multiple contemporary sources, not folklore. By the end of September 7th, Szigetvar had fallen. The defense, and nearly the entire garrison, was gone. Szigetvar had held out for roughly a month against one of the largest armies Europe had ever seen. That delay mattered. The 1566 campaign season was already well advanced by the time the fortress finally fell. With autumn approaching and the campaign badly behind schedule, the Ottoman army did not push on to Vienna that year. The army instead withdrew for winter, and the planned advance on the Habsburg capital never resumed under Suleiman's successor with the same momentum. Let's be honest about the phrase, ended the Ottoman advance forever. It didn't, not literally, and modern historians are clear about this. The Ottoman Empire continued to expand and campaign in Europe for well over another century after 1566. The Ottomans would go on to besiege Vienna again in 1683, 117 years later, an even larger and more famous siege. So Szigetvar did not end Ottoman military ambition in Europe. What it did do, and this is where the real history is more impressive than the myth, is stall one specific massive campaign at exactly the moment the empire had its greatest sultan and its greatest army in the field, at the edge of Central Europe, with Vienna as the target. Suleiman's death at Szigetvar marked something bigger than one battle. He was the last of the classical Ottoman warrior sultans, who personally led major campaigns into Europe at that scale. After Suleiman, no Ottoman sultan would personally command an army into Central Europe with the same scope and frequency. The empire remained enormously powerful for centuries, but the specific model of a sultan riding at the head of an army into the heart of Europe, campaign after campaign, effectively ended with him. The concealment of Suleiman's death is one of the most remarkable examples of Ottoman statecraft in the empire's history. Grand Vizier Sokalu Mehmed Pasha managed to keep tens of thousands of soldiers in hostile territory, unaware that their sultan, the man they served, was already dead, long enough to ensure an orderly succession back in Constantinople. It worked. Selim too took the throne without a succession crisis breaking out in the field. Legend clearly marked as legend. Decades later, Zrinski's own great-grandson, the poet and statesman Nikola Šubić, a different, later Nikola Šubić, wrote an epic poem titled Sigeti Vesedalim, The Peril of Siget, turning his ancestors' last stand into a heroic literary epic, complete with dramatic speeches and religious framing. That poem shaped how Croatians and Hungarians remember Zrinski for centuries afterward, but it is 17th-century literature, not a battlefield transcript. What is documented, independent of the poetry, is narrower but still remarkable. Zrinski held a minor fortress for roughly a month against an imperial army roughly 40 times its garrison size, and chose a final charge over surrender, on the same campaign during which the sultan commanding the army opposing him died. Strip away the exaggerated title, and the actual history of Szigetvar teaches something sharper than 2,300 men stopped an empire. It teaches this: a small stubborn defense in the right place at the right time can cost an empire far more than its size would suggest. Not by winning, but by simply making victory too slow and too expensive. Szigetvar fell. Zrinski died. Almost his entire garrison died with him. And yet the siege still helped end, for that year, the ambition of the most powerful army in Europe to reach Vienna. And it happened to coincide with the death of the Sultan who had personally built that ambition over nearly 5 decades of campaigning. Sometimes history's biggest turning points aren't won on the battlefield. They're bought, in time, in delay, in attrition, by people who know they cannot win, but choose to make losing as costly as possible. This has been the Siege of Szigetvar, 1566.